to get the job done. My friends, I'm very excited to be a part of the change that we need in this country. I think this is the most important election in this country's history. I'm encouraged to see so many people here. When I'm asked, why am I running, my response is usually, why aren't you? This is so important, this election. It's a critical point in this country's history. I find it almost disgusting that anyone would have supported Bill C-51, put it forward. The NDP will repeal it. That's a crucial part of what's wrong with this country today. It's a threat that we have to address. We can elect Tom Mulcair as our Prime Minister, and we can put Canada back on track. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Flanagan?
Thank you, Monica and Don, the Chamber of Commerce, Sault College and Algoma University, and Shaw Cable and Local 2, and my colleagues up here, Skip, Terry, and Brian. And thank you very much for the opportunity and for including the Green Party in the debates and expanding democracy. We really appreciate that, especially in light of what's going on across the rest of the country. I've been an environmentalist ever since I was 3 or 4 years old. My mom tells a story of when I was a little girl and I'd go up to the boys and ask them to pick up the candy wrappers that they were throwing on the ground. It's just always been a part of me. And growing up, I was fortunate enough to get involved in pollution probe and get into the environmental health program at Ryerson, which was perfect because I was attracted to it because there was a huge earth on it, and we only have one planet, and all my life I've known that we have to protect what we have. Fortunately, the program that I got into, environmental health, ties both of them together because they really cannot be separated. We cannot continue to abuse our planet and continue to think that we are going to be healthy. So we must make the connection, and it's urgent at this point that we get actively involved in turning this ship around, in addressing climate change, stopping the destruction and the increasing instability that's happening. We have to get involved because not only at this point do we have to mitigate, which we still have an opportunity to do, and we must make full advantage of that, but we also have to be in a position of adapting to the radical changes that are going to be thrown our way. And we are ill-prepared to do that. The Green Party has, of course, always been identified with the environment. Unfortunately, people have not been aware that we tie environment and health together all the time. Everything that we do and we plan is in order to protect health and protect people. We believe in protecting what we love, the places and the people. And so our platform this year, in 2015, is all about protecting those two things. The Green Party's always believed in fiscal responsibility and ecological health and social justice. Those are the three main pillars of what we do and why we do it. We believe in a sustainable economy because tomorrow is serious business and we have to take action today. For example, we want a national sustainable jobs plan, which includes advancing the trades and apprenticeships and all education. We want to slash student debt. I'm sure you've heard recently about abolishing tuition fees completely by 2020. So that's supporting our young people who need all the support that they can get. We need to have jobs for them to move into so that they can stay in our community. We need to partner with our First Nations so that when we do resource extraction, that we do it responsibly. And we need to heal that relationship. Canadian small businesses are so important. 7.7 million of us work for small businesses. And so the Green Party knows that in order for our economy to be resilient and responsive, we need the flexibility that's available in our small businesses. So we need to support that. We also need to be cognizant that our food is so important. Big farms are causing a lot of serious environmental problems, and so we need to promote local food and organics and I'm glad that our farmers markets are so well attended. We need strong communities because Canada depends on it. We will defend our healthcare system. We cannot have a two-tiered system. We need a national senior strategy. We need a national dementia strategy. We need to eliminate poverty and inequality. We need housing strategy so that there are no poor and homeless people. We also need to promote pay equity. We need a strong First Nation community, and we need to reinvest in the CBC and to expand the CBC funding so that we do not disappear culturally.
Thank you. Mr. Sheehan?
I'd like to thank you, Madam Chair, the panelists, fellow candidates, and everyone tuning in to this political forum live. A special thanks to Sault Ste. Marie Chamber of Commerce, Algoma University, Sault College, Shaw TV, and Village Media for hosting us here this evening. My name is Terry Sheehan, and I'm honored to have the privilege to be your candidate for the Liberal Party of Canada in the 2015 federal election. I was born and raised in Sault Ste. Marie. Lived here my whole entire life. I was educated at St. Patrick's Elementary School, Sir James Dunn, and attended Lake Superior State University, where I studied political science. After university, my love for my city drove me to plant my roots here and make a life in my hometown. My wife Lisa and I are gainfully employed in Sault Ste. Marie and have been raising our children here. My passion for our city only grew with time, and in 1997, I decided to run in the municipal election as a school board trustee. I won and ended up serving 2 terms for the city and the district of Algoma. This leadership role encouraged me to apply my passion and vision for our city at a higher level. In 2003, I decided to run for city council and was elected and re-elected in 2006, 2010, and 2014. I like to think of these election results as a testament for the people that I've represented about my work as their voice in the community. For years, I've been committed to their service and to the betterment of this city and the surrounding area. Outside of my involvement in politics, I've spent my career working in both private and public sector business, economic, and community development. I'm currently employed as a training consultant and employment consultant with the Ministry of Training, Colleges, and Universities. I've been active my entire life in the community, serving on many committees and boards. These include the Chamber of Commerce Business Advisory Committee, the Algoma District Municipal Association, Doctor Recruitment, Sault College Hospitality Advisory Committee, Cultural Advisory, Green Committee, Finance Committee, and Chamber Award Selection Committee, just to name a few. My role as a leader in the community in various capacities, including my experience as a trustee and on council, has helped me prepare for this very important role. I feel that I'm ready to represent the work for the Sault and in the surrounding area at a higher level to get the results that our community deserves. I'm running in this election because I know that better is always possible for our community. I have been energized by the Liberal platform and share the same values and vision of what our country can be. We have a real plan for positive, real change with 3 main points to it: job creation, growing the middle class, and helping those that are wanting to join it. We've also unveiled our plan for seniors, which include greater retirement security so that Canadians who work hard all their life will be able to retire and still have a quality of life. We're also committed to restoring the age for old age security to 65, increase the guaranteed income supplement for lower income single seniors, and it has always been part of our plan to keep senior pension income splitting. We've detailed a plan that makes sense for our youth, one that will help create jobs and opportunity for them because they are our future. The Liberal plan will also help create jobs by addressing our crumbling infrastructure, a problem everyone knows we have. This means repairing bridges and highways and buildings that have been neglected by the current government. These are the investments that we will make when we form government, and they are investments into our collective future. Not only will it help create jobs for the workforce, today it will ensure work and a better future for our children and grandchildren. Now, Mr. Hayes is going to tell you that everything is all right, that everything is going according to plan. He's going to tell you that we have a surplus to work with from last year. Why he won't tell you is that the surplus has been created on the backs of hardworking Canadians. Services have seen massive cuts so that the Conservatives could say during this election that they balanced the books last year. I've been at the doors and I can tell you that things aren't going according to plan for ordinary Canadians. They're feeling the pinch of conservative policies that only have the wealthiest few in mind. Not only that, but Canada is the only G7 country in a recession right now. We can't afford this anymore. We can't toot a surplus in a recession. It doesn't make sound policy sense. On the other hand, Mr. Morrison is going to talk about all the promises the NDP have made to Canadians over the campaign. Promises that look great in theory, but that will be very expensive in practice. They're delivering these promises to you with one big major promise attached, that they will balance the budget within 6 months if elected. It doesn't make sense to promise more services and better benefits while trying to balance a budget. The NDP are trying to offer policies that appeal to all Canadians, but are trying to manage the purse strings exactly like the Conservatives.
Thank you. Mr. Hayes?
Good evening. It's an honor to be here today, and I'd like to thank the organizers of this event this evening. In 2011, I made a promise. My commitment was to stand up for you, to strongly represent you before the federal government while bringing national attention to the issues that are most important to you. In just over 4 years, I am proud to have used the support of your vote in Ottawa to keep your personal taxes at record lows. A family of 4 has seen an annual savings of approximately $6,600. That money can be better spent on retirement savings, on education, or a project at home, as opposed to sitting in government coffers. Further, 1 million low-income individuals have been completely removed from the tax rolls, including 400,000 seniors. And every single family with children under 18 years of age will benefit from our range of tax reductions. Seniors, and now for the first time ever, families can split their income, saving up to $2,000 per year. We have also focused on business, and for a very simple reason. When hydro rates in Northern Ontario spiked under the provincial government, our small businesses felt it, and many laid off workers or moved elsewhere. If business taxes increase, as the Liberal and NDP propose, we can expect the same negative result for our Northern Ontario economy. The choice before you in this election couldn't be more clear. On one hand, you have our Conservative Party with an economic record of generating over 1.3 million net new jobs since the depth of the greatest recession in my lifetime. You have a Conservative government who has balanced the books on time, as promised, and done so while making very significant investments in our community, while at the same time reducing taxes. Or you have 2 opposition parties who will balance the budget in a few years, or haven't even taken the time yet to figure out how much their promises actually cost. In addition to this clear choice, I am proud to have been a strong, effective voice in Ottawa for the interests of Sault Ste. Marie. When Huron Central was about to shut its doors, our government was at the table with $15 million. When bureaucrats in Ottawa recommended to Minister Raitt that the government should cancel funding for the ACR, I was proud to lead a core group of local experts and stakeholders, and we secured another $5.3 million from the federal government over 3 years to keep the line going once a private operator was secured. And we all remember the floods of a few years ago. Well, our Conservative government has announced $10.4 million towards upgrading our flood control infrastructure, the Fort Creek Aqueduct. In fact, Sault Ste. Marie has seen record investments in virtually every area of our economy, from infrastructure such as the armories, the Great Lakes Forest Research Centre, and the Canada Customs Plaza, to youth internships, to tourism projects, to the Port of Algoma, and to our largest employer, SR Algoma, to name but a few. All of these projects have created and will create jobs into the future. And at the very same time, our Conservative government has balanced the books. Truly, growing our economy requires opening borders and giving companies of all sizes, but especially Tenaris and SR, vast new markets to sell their goods. While the opposition parties want to raise business taxes on companies like SR and Tenaris, our party wants to help them sell their goods to 500 million new customers with the Canada-European Trade Agreement. That's why our party has signed over 30 trade agreements since 2006, compared to but 3 under the previous Liberal government and of course, none under the NDP. In fact, the NDP have actively opposed almost every single trade agreement. 4 years ago, I made a promise to stand up for you here in Sault Ste. Marie and in Ottawa. It has been my privilege to serve you in this capacity, and on October 19th, I'm asking for your support so we can continue to help grow our economy, keep our communities safe, and have a strong voice in Ottawa for one of the greatest cities in Canada, Sault Ste. Marie. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now move into the question period of the forum. First question from the panel, please.
In August 2015, Sault Ste. Marie had an unemployment rate of 12.2%, compared to 5.7% in August 2014. What will you do to lower the unemployment rate in Sault Ste. Marie and ensure the unemployment rate consistently remains stable?
Mr. Morrison?
Stability is a difficult thing to promise, but what we have promised is to reinvigorate the small business, which is the driver of most of the jobs in this country. It's the driver of 80% of the jobs. We've already pledged to lower the small business tax rate from 11% to 9%, and this is going to generate jobs. These are the tax saving is where small businesses are going to improve their bottom line and be able to expand. We have always advocated is correcting and staying vigilant on dumping of steel, which Mr. Hayes seems to forget that 500 jobs were lost, even though he was touting that he was advocating new markets for Tenaris. 500 people were laid off there. There's some unemployment that could have been prevented. After 4 years, and watching the dumping that took place for 4 years, then the Conservatives decided to launch an international trade tribunal dispute and did in fact find that there was dumping. So if we stay vigilant on unfair trade practices, and if we reinvigorate small businesses and increase their bottom line, we'll be able to improve the employment situation. The Conservatives have also been responsible for massive layoffs in the federal public service. So border service jobs, Canada Post, Department of Fisheries and Oceans, these are good jobs. These are not luxury positions like a candy factory that's been closed, that's been supported by a socialist government, which they try to say. We're saying that these are good essential jobs that the Harper government has deemed to be unnecessary. So those are also good science-related jobs that young people can aspire to, or they could have aspired to prior to Mr. Hayes' tenure.
Flanagan?
Thank you. The Green Party and the NDP and the Liberals all support that small business is very, very important, but we do plan on going about it in a different way. Our small businesses need the red tape to be cut so that they can make decisions that are going to be better for their business. And the Green Party has a plan called Think Small First, and that means that all levels of government need to look at the regulations that they have in place and what is impeding small businesses from growing. We see opportunities for clean tech, we see opportunities for R&D, and in order to fund these things and get venture capital available to small businesses and entrepreneurs, we would create the money from increasing the corporate tax rate from 15% up to 19%. We would get rid of tax havens and money that's not not being spent on waste. Sorry about that. The investing in having our people work on our infrastructure, our bridges, our roads, retrofitting our hospitals, universities, and schools for energy efficiency, for retrofitting our homes. Right there, we increase our housing stock, we decrease our carbon footprint, we put the trades to work, and those are all local jobs. They cannot be outsourced to India or China. Those are important things that would keep people working in our community and give people opportunities. Expanding Canada Post. Not only is this an issue for people who have accessibility issues, it means that more people have to carry the mail.
Thank you. Mr. Sheehan?
Thank you very much for that very important question. Let me begin by saying, first of all, that rate is unacceptable, the 12+%. First thing that we need to do is address, for those people, because we've got to talk about those people first, is address the problems in EI, the wait times, expedite the process to get money to their families. So these people that are unemployed, can find the assistance that they need. On the plan for jobs, the Liberals have the best plan. We're going to kickstart this economy by investing in infrastructure. We're making historical, investments in infrastructure, which will spur on construction activity, because we're going to build roads, bridges, buildings, social infrastructure like senior facilities and affordable housing. That is going to be kickstarting the economy. And also what that does, it also creates a business for our local steel plant. Our steel plant has steel industry makes steel for those kinds of construction jobs and for a process in asphalt making. So our plan is good for the local economy as well. We also have to take a look at what's happening across Canada, because in the StatsCan report, there are 10 sectors right across Canada that are failing. So we have a plan to invest in clean green energy and clean green jobs. Mr. Trudeau was here announcing $200 million for sector-specific strategies and $100 million, to research towards that places in this place could use. So we bring together the universities, the college, the scientists, we unmuzzle them, the entrepreneurs, the business, and we get together with all the community leaders and we come up with a plan, and that's what I've proposed. I will do it through leadership. We come out through a plan for also diversifying this economy and our long-term commitment to jobs, and that is how we can get ourselves moving once again. It's through leadership, pulling people together, and finding these tools that the Liberal government has. Thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Hayes?
For starters, we won't raise taxes. I'll make that perfectly clear. Since we formed government in 2006, we've reduced the corporate tax rate from 22% to 15%. We've reduced the small business tax rate from 12% to 11%, and we will reduce that to 9% moving forward. We understand very, very clearly that our business community does not need higher taxes. Secondly, we'll continue to do exactly what we're doing specific to promoting trade agreements. Our government has been involved in signing 30 trade agreements. 1 in 5 jobs in Canada are a direct result of trade agreements. As I mentioned earlier, the Liberal government in their 14 years signed 3 trade agreements. The NDP have supported but 1 trade agreement. We're going to continue with our targeted investments. One of those targeted investments I can point out to is the $30 million interest-free loan that we provided to SR Algoma Steel. That was a targeted investment for our manufacturing sector to promote manufacturing jobs in Northern Ontario. We will continue with our training programs. We'll continue to train our youth. As a matter of fact, specific to youth, we will provide $65 million over the next 4 years to better align the curricula of our educational institutions with the needs of employers, because the reality is, in certain skilled trades, there is in fact a job shortage. And I've conducted a number of roundtable discussions with our local employers, and we understand that. That's why we're also creating $100 million a year towards apprenticeship loans to assist our apprentices. We're providing tax credits to our businesses that actually hire apprentices. Furthermore, with respect to infrastructure, yes, indeed, infrastructure is a job creator. And that's why our Conservative government here in Sault Ste. Marie has contributed $2.1 million towards phase 2 of the development of the Port of Algoma, and recently announced multiple millions of dollars in infrastructure investment right here in Sault Ste. Marie.
Thank you. I have been asked for the audience to hold the applause, please. I'd like to call on the next question from our panel.
Hello. In June of this year, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission tabled a list of recommendations to address the legacy of residential schools and to improve Canadian First Nation relations. What should Canada do with regards to Indigenous issues, such as improving conditions on reserves, respecting treaty rights, and addressing the high rates of missing and murdered Aboriginal women?
Could you start this one for us, please, Ms. Flanagan?
Thank you. Thank you for the question. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission and their 93 recommendations need to be implemented right away. It's such a tragedy what we have done to our First Nations hosts who welcomed us to this Turtle Island all those years ago. And we've done nothing but tried to colonize them, and it's been very damaging. The residential schools have caused serious hurt and damage to their culture. It's a form of genocide, cultural genocide, and we all need to acknowledge that, and it'll take a long time to heal that. We believe that our First Nations, our Anishinaabe people here, are entitled to self-governance, and we would recognize them as a government and deal with them government to government. We need to help them identify what would work for them and what they need, so that we can support them to making the changes that will bring them into restoring their culture and their identity. We also need, excuse me, to have a commission for figuring out what's happening with our missing and murdered women. This is a horrible thing. I can't imagine that anyone would not want to know what is going on and how it's happening, why it's happening, and what can we do to prevent it. This has been going on far too long. Improving conditions on the reserves. It's deplorable that they have third world conditions. They have drinking water that is not potable. That's inexcusable here in Canada. Their housing needs to be redressed. We have to find a way to make amends and be supportive so that and build them up. We need to support their education. The money that has been withheld from their education and capped for the last many years, that's inexcusable. They need to be able to rediscover and grow their culture.
Next is Mr. Sheehan.
Thank you very much for the question. I had the opportunity to listen to Chief Justice Sinclair at Algoma University as he presented the Truth and Reconciliation findings and his experience. Very, very, very moving. That's why I'm pleased to say the Liberals have a significant, great plan as it relates to that. We're calling for the implementation of all of the recommendations. They are necessary. It's very important. And on the First Nations issues, we have a great plan that, we're going to begin a conversation, a nation-to-nation conversation, and, let the First Nations help us, help them, because they understand it. They get it, and we need to be there for them. We're calling a public inquiry into the missing and murdered Aboriginal women and girls. We were right out of the gate with that one. It's so important. There's been callous remarks made in the media, and I won't go over them because it's a terrible thing that's happened. I had an opportunity years ago to be at the Roberta Bonder building when a woman came walking through across Canada about the Highway of Tears up in BC. That was also very moving. I've had lots of experience with the First Nations over and over again, just not at election time. And I tell you, it's a great community to learn from. Not only do I respect them, I admire them, and we owe it to them. The Liberal government also has announced an economic plan and also an education plan for First Nations, which is $515 million for K-12 education, rising to $750 million per year by the end of the first mandate, and investing $500 million for the First Nation education infrastructure and $50 million additional money for First Nation post-education schooling. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hayes.
Thank you very much. Our government is actually currently reviewing the report. It's a very extensive report. There were a number of recommendations, and obviously we want to analyze it and fully cost the recommendations and fully consider an implementation plan, and I think that's the right way to go about it. But with respect to protecting Aboriginal women and girls, Our government has taken important steps. As a matter of fact, in Economic Action Plan 2015, we've invested an additional $25 million over 5 years as part of an action plan to address family violence and crimes against Aboriginal women and girls. And that plan was released in September of 2014. This 5-year action plan outlines concrete actions to prevent violence, support Aboriginal victims, and protect Aboriginal women and girls from violence. On top of that, it was our government, we demonstrated strong support for matrimonial real property rights by passing the Family, Homes on Reserves and Matrimonial Interests or Rights Act and supporting the establishment of the Centre of Excellence for Matrimonial Real Property. This was to give First Nation women the same matrimonial rights as off-reserve individuals. And incidentally, that was a piece of legislation that was not supported by the New Democratic Party. We have partnered with First Nations, and it takes a partnership. It takes a partnership with the provinces, it takes a partnership with the First Nations, it takes a partnership with service deliverers. Our government has been at the table with record investments for our First Nations. We have contributed millions of dollars with respect to new wastewater management systems, with respect to new homes on reserves, with respect to health care for our First Nations partners, and we will continue to do so. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Mr. Morrison.
Skip Morrison, Indigenous, Bawating and Dunjaba, Shaganash, Nini and Dao. I'm proud to have been part of a presentation to Chief Sayers and to Chief Sayers. The NDP will build a nation-to-nation relationship with the Anishinaabe. We will not call immediately a national inquiry into the issue of the 1,200 missing and murdered women within 100 days. We will create a cabinet-level committee chaired by Tom Mulcair as Prime Minister to ensure that all government decisions respect treaty rights, inherent rights, and Canada's international obligations. We will fix our nation's broken treaty process and deal with unresolved land claims. We will implement the principles of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. We will reverse the damage done by Stephen Harper to the environmental assessment review process, and we will enact a national water strategy to defend water as a public resource, declare it to be a human right, and we will eliminate all boil water advisories on First Nation communities. We will take action in consultation on all of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission recommendations on a priority basis, and we will fully repeal Bill C-51, which we all know, and the politically astute First Nations leaders that I've spoken to recognize this to be the first step in circumventing the rule of law and disrupting legal and lawful and rightful protests to environmental degradation. And Mr. Hayes, I don't know how you sit here and say that you've done anything for First Nations women when your leader has said the issue of murdered and missing Aboriginal women is not high on his radar.
Hold the applause, please. Thank you. Could I call on the panel for the next question?
Canada's trade agenda has heated up over the past few years, with new trade agreements and export promotion services. What would you do to ensure Canada reaps the full potential of these initiatives? What's your opinion of the Trans-Pacific Partnership?
Please start this one for us, Mr. Sheehan.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to. Thank you for the question. The Liberal Party supports free trade because they know how important it is for us to be able to access markets, and we have supported not just the quantity, but the quality of the trade, which is really important in our mind. That's why we encourage to have open and transparent dialogues through the process, including the Trans-Pacific Partnership and seat of the Comprehensive Economic Trade Agreement. We're supportive of trade. However, the way the Conservatives have had it under such secrecy, and we've constantly asked for public input, for consultation, so that we know exactly, where we're going with these trade agreements, but those have not been denied. But as a whole, trade is very, very important, not only to Canada, but for this community as well. Fair trade that is equal, that goes, both ways. And I'm committed to it. I have organized in my life. I've had experience directly hands-on in organizing inbound and outbound trade missions. The Irish one comes to mind when my work at the Economic Development Corporation. There's the Italians. I'm just not going to start naming them all, but they're very, very important. And you know, for trades, for goods, for people, for ideas, for students, and transferring you know, knowledge. You know, we need to make this place a you know, a more peaceful, trade-friendly place instead of a you know, a world that is full of war and non-commerce. So trade is one of the ways to get to peace, and I strongly believe that and firmly support that as the Liberal Party has. So I look forward to being your MP. I have the experience working in trade. It's important to me, and I will continue to work hard as your MP in the future. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hayes.
Thank you very much. I think the Conservative government's record speaks for itself in terms of the number of trade agreements that we've negotiated since 2006, and I reiterate that the Liberals in their 14 years negotiated 3 trade agreements. So I respect that Mr. Sheehan is supportive of trade agreements moving forward because obviously he has seen the benefits. As I mentioned earlier, 1 in 5 jobs in Canada is a direct result of trade agreements. CETA, for example, has reduced the price of steel by 7%. So that's opened a whole new market and given our steel industry global competitiveness. The Trans-Pacific Partnership is probably one of the most significant trade agreements we will ever achieve in the history of our country. And our Conservative government is negotiating that right now. And we will not negotiate anything that is not in the best interests of Canadians. And there have been consultations all along the way. We listen to our business community, we listen to our exporters, and we're bringing to the table the concerns of our Canadian businesses, and we're negotiating in their best interests. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Mr. Morrison.
1 in 5 jobs. Where are the jobs, Brian? They're not in Sault Ste. Marie. And the process of negotiating these trade agreements completely in secret is done with corporations and behind closed doors. FIPA is a good example. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, no one knows what the ties are within that. The NDP is fully and behind free trade. What we've always advocated, and the reason we haven't signed any of your ridiculous agreements, is because there's been no aspect of fair trade. Now, if we could negotiate trade deals with countries where we established and demanded environmental regulations, human rights abuses to be curtailed, wages and benefits and pensions were equitably distributed to countries around the world where we're trying to build a better world, then we would be on an even playing field. And guess what? If we had those kind of trade deals, companies here within Canada would have no inclination to want to relocate to Mexico or the Philippines or Korea. So if you want to know why the NDP hasn't signed any of your ridiculous trade deals, it's because they haven't created jobs here and they haven't, for the most part, improved the living conditions of people around the world.
Thank you. Ms. Flanagan.
The Greens will vigorously oppose the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the Comprehensive Economic Trades Agreement. Of all the damaging things done to Canada in the last 9 years, ratifying the Canada-China Investment Treaty in secret by Cabinet alone, without any parliamentary or public hearings, poses the greatest long-term threat to our sovereignty. The deal was made and locks us into until the year 2045, and it gives China superior rights to those of Canada. How many cases has Canada won in NAFTA against the United States? I believe it might be 1, but the United States has won them all. So now that they have superior rights to us, they can bring arbitration claims against Canada in secret tribunals. These are not courts, but private arbitrations in which arbitrators gain personally and financially through a system that lacks the fairness and predictability of our national courts. Thanks to Stephen Harper, our sovereignty has been significantly eroded. In the next Parliament, Greens will press for legislation to require that any and all complaints from Beijing under the treaty Even early diplomatic complaints must be made public. We must ensure that all the other party leaders understand that Canadians want to fight for our laws and push back against complaints from state-owned enterprises from the People's Republic of China. If Beijing complains about a municipal bylaw or proposed legislative change, such as reversing damage to the Fisheries Act, environmental assessment, or navigable waters protection, we will not cave. We will not let FIPA cause government to pull back from doing the right thing. We need transparent commitment to aggressively defend Canada's policies and decisions, and if we must, to write a check for damages under FIPA rather than cancel planned laws or repeal existing ones.
Thank you. Could we have the next question from the panel, please?
The North has a number of opportunities in the agriculture, mining, bioeconomy, forestry, and tourism sectors. What will you do to aid the North in achieving its full potential and effectively advance the region's competitive advantages?
Please start this one off. Mr. Hayes.
Thank you very much. And indeed, the North does have a number of opportunities. Northern Ontario is very, very, very unique. We do have an agricultural section that does extremely well, and our government has invested heavily in the RAIN project, Rural Algoma Innovation Network, to assist our Northern Ontario farmers in terms of innovation. In the forestry sector, our government has initiated a $1 billion pulp and paper forestry innovation fund to assist our forestry sector in new innovation and technology. With respect to tourism sectors, our government has a tourism strategy, and you may recall, it wasn't that long ago that I did indeed announce tourism dollars for tourism in Northern Ontario, as well as for the implementation of signage for the Group of Seven with respect to, I forget the name of the group, I'm sorry, I apologize if you're watching tonight. So with respect to mining, we have implemented tax credits, and this is specific to not only mining and manufacturing. It's called the Accelerated Capital Cost Allowance. This assists our manufacturers in mining and steel in order to invest in new equipment, to modernize their facilities so that they can create jobs moving forward. So as a government, we're obviously well apprised of the situation in Northern Ontario, and I've worked very hard for our Northern Ontario economy. I've had the Prime Minister here 3 times. He understands the Northern Ontario economy. As a matter of fact, he was here introducing conservation tourism projects for the fishing and angling industry. So he was announced, I think it was $30 million over 5 years in support of that sector. So we'll continue with the mindset of Northern Ontario in mind, and obviously that's why I'm your Member of Parliament, to support you in Northern Ontario. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Morrison.
We've lost over 10,000 jobs in this region over the last year alone. It's safe to say that this government has forgotten all about Northern Ontario. It's a huge region. FedNor covers 10 different ridings. Transportation is a key to the success within this riding. FedNor funding has decreased year over year since the Conservatives have taken office. In 2006, the budget for FedNor was $76 million. In 2014, they'd successfully diminished that down to $45 million. And in the last year, the Tories left $8.5 million that was allocated and budgeted to FedNor unspent. So they have left FedNor despite Tony Martin and previous NDP requests to have it as an independent standalone agency. It is still within the, it's referred to on Parliament Hill as within the bowels of Industry Canada, down in the basement where it takes a bureaucratic hurdles to get to process applications for agriculture, for mining, for forestry. It's, the North has been forgotten by the Conservative government. I don't see anything, if you want to look any further than how Mr. Hayes mishandled the ACR, the principal form of tourism, and for this area, he likes to call it as a glitch, so I think it's much more than a glitch. There are essential infrastructures that have to be put in place for those 3 industries that you mentioned, those aspects of the economy. Infrastructure is crucial, rail is crucial, and the FedNor application is the easiest way for us to access applications by different businesses that want to expand.
Thanks very much. Ms. Flanagan?
Thank you. Then we do have very much an issue with exporting all of our natural resources, and it's been like that forever. But it can't remain that way. We need to change the way we think about mining and forestry, because they do so many damaging things to our environment that cause serious health problems. The value of our forests, as far as being the lungs of the planet, as far as taking care of the carbon dioxide, we need those forests to exist. For example, if we were to switch and increase agriculture for hemp products, you get 6 times as much paper out of an acre of hemp as you do an acre of forest. And the forest does fabulous things for improving our air and reducing carbon dioxide problems. So changing our agriculture to local and organic, away from big farms, that provides jobs. Wouldn't it be great if a kid was asked what they wanted to be when they grow up and they said a farmer? Because nobody says that anymore. And so we do have challenges with our short growing season. However, we do need to ensure that we have food security here, and growing things locally will help with that. And supporting small farms and encouraging farms through the Ontario Farm Association, which has been so successful. Those are things that we can do. Mining it has to be done in a very thoughtful way. It has to be as protective of the environment as possible. If you look at what's been happening out in the tar sands, the waste can be seen from space, and we can't afford that. We also need to renegotiate the royalties so that we get paid properly for the use of and extraction of our resources. So that's a revenue stream.
Thank you. Please wrap this one up for us, Mr. Sheehan.
Gladly. What will you do to aid the North in achieving its full potential and effectively advance the region's competitive advantage? What I would do, as I mentioned before, is I would bring people together, and that's what we do in Sault Ste. Marie. And if we want to accomplish something, there are planks in the Liberal platform, including $200 million a year for sector-specific strategies that will help out with the forestry sector, the mining, and energy sectors. That's one. As it relates to the other ones, our infrastructure plan has identified ports as being eligible. Right now, we're in the process of studying, the port of Algoma, and right now they're going through environmental assessments, and I support that. But we have to open that up to making sure that we're looking not only the benefits of SR, because those are many, also for Northern Ontario. And the Port of Algoma, we've identified in our historic infrastructure funding over 10 years, and not just before an election that Mr. Hayes had mentioned about his infrastructure investments. They were all weeks before the election were called, and much more electioneering than anything. Ours is a 10-year plan, and it fits really well into the Port of Algoma. So we'll be able to do that, which then also leads to opportunities such as the Ring of Fire, which could benefit us as well. As it relates to the tourism sector, I'm totally devoted to getting the ACR train on track. It was the Conservative government that pulled the $2.2 million that created this mess. That's a stated fact, and I'm willing to work with the group as well. The group has contacted me. I've spoken with them, and there's not the whole group. I can't speak to the whole group, but a couple of people have emailed me today and like my direction. So I'm committed to taking the lead, because the unemployment rate is 12.4%, and we have to fix it here in Sault Ste. Marie and Northern Ontario. It's actually the worst in Sault Ste. Marie, probably followed by...
Thanks. The next question for our candidates from the panel, please.
Canada's commitment to developing its energy and other exports has serious environmental implications. What will you and your party do to address climate change and to protect the environment?
Starting with Mr. Morrison, please.
We will not willfully ignore this, one of the greatest threats to this planet. The Harper government's attitude has embarrassed us globally with its refusal to really address this situation or to attend conferences. Our position is to embark on a cap-and-trade process, which basically and simplistically says that big polluters should pay, and the efficiency of an industry allows it to pay less, save money, and the secondary component to that is climate change has had a drastic effect on political upheaval in various parts of the world. So it's an underreported aspect of the urgency with which we have to address climate change. There was a 4-year drought in Syria leading up into the mass migration of many farm community people into the cities, which exacerbated and increased the problems within Syria. So it is an issue that needs to be addressed. Tom Mulcair was an environment minister in the cabinet in the province of Quebec. He sustainably developed a constant year-over-year reduction in the carbon footprint of that province, and he's demonstrated knowledge and a willingness to address that, to sit with the other premiers of the provinces. Another issue which is it a surprise to anyone that Mr. Harper decided not to address this issue or not to meet with premiers of this country ever? I'm sure Mr. Hayes is proud of Mr. Harper's role in that, but I'm waiting to hear him tell us, if anything, what he's done.
Thank you. Ms. Flanagan.
Unfortunately, we have made such a commitment to fossil fuels, finite, and they've done so much damage, and we've become so dependent on them that it's very difficult for us to even imagine not being dependent on them. It's difficult to even imagine that we don't have to. I know I became very depressed when I realized how dependent we were on fossil fuels, and it seemed like there's no way off of this dependence. But there is a plan. When I was reading the Green Party plan, it gave me hope. So, but we have to start acting now, and we can't continue down this path. We have to leave the tar sands in the ground, and we have to move to renewables and green energy. A cap and trade system just means that the big players can trade off a few things. The Green Party proposes a fee and dividend thing, so that we would put a carbon tax at $30 a ton, and then we would tax the things that we don't like, the pollution and the waste. So the tar sands, all things that cause environmental damage would be subject to the carbon tax. Now, the fee would be, of course, would generate funds, and that money would be redistributed to every Canadian over the age of 18. So it would be a revenue neutral thing. And what this does is that it equals the playing field. We have to stop subsidizing the fossil fuel industry so that we can reinvest in green technology and renewables. And the revenues would be redistributed to all Canadians. Sorry.
Thank you. Next is Mr. Sheehan.
Thank you very much for this very important question. It's a very important part of the Liberal platform. Climate change is very, 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 very important because, well, what we currently have is we have too many people, including the Prime Minister, who thinks that, you know, the two of them are just completely opposite and they cannot be combined into creating the economy or an economic output. We see that there are environmental changes that can also be good for the economy as well. Again, I harken back when Trudeau was here talking about the $200 million for sector-specific strategies for clean, kind of green advances in the various traditional sectors of the economy. $100 million for research towards bettering, our environment and economy. But specifically on climate change, our commitments are to attend the Paris Climate Conference within 90 days, hold the first ministers meeting together on a framework for combating climate change and reducing Canada's carbon emission, partner with provinces and territories to establish national emissions, reducing targets and ensuring they have targeted federal funding and the flexibility to design their own policies to meet these commitments, including their own carbon pricing policies, phase out subsidies for the fossil fuel industry in order to fulfill Canada's G20 commitment. work with the United States and Mexico to develop an ambitious North American clean energy environmental agreement. We believe you can do both because it's good for the economy, it's good for the environment, it's good for our health, and it's good for our children. We're going to preserve the national parks. We're going to unmuzzle the scientists that have been muzzled about their scientific research that conflicts with conservative policy, including the experimental lakes, and we're going to invest money into the Great Lakes Basin to improve our waterways around here. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Please close this question off for us, Mr. Hayes.
Thank you very much. Our government has undertaken a sector-by-sector regulatory approach. And as a matter of fact, in 2012, Canada's GHG emissions were lower than in 2005, while the economy grew during the same period. Canada boasts one of the cleanest electricity systems in the G7 and in the world, with 79% of our electricity supply emitting no greenhouse gases. The government has invested more than $10 billion in green infrastructure, energy efficiency, clean energy technologies, cleaner fuels, and smarter grids. Canada, together with the United States and Mexico, is also leading international efforts to use the expertise and institutions of the Montreal Protocol to phase down the production and consumption of HFCs, which are potent GHGs. We will not implement a carbon tax or a cap and trade. The NDP have indicated that they will implement a carbon tax, which will cost the Canadian economy and taxpayers $20 billion. It'll raise the price of everything. The Liberals have talked about a cap and trade. That is what the provincial Liberals are going to do, and mark my word, the federal Liberals will do the same. History has shown that these do not result in a reduction in greenhouse gas emissions. They're simply a tax on hard-working Canadians. When you talk to somebody like SR Steel, they will tell you they have reduced their emissions, and they've reduced them as the result of our sector-by-sector implementation. So it is working, and I think we'll continue along the course.
Thank you. Could we have the next question?
Balanced budgets are important, but we also see the need for big investment in infrastructure, skills, and competitive tax regimes. The annual debt has risen to roughly $66 billion, and the annual service charge now stands at $30 billion. How important is a balanced budget to your party? How do you prioritize tax versus spending? How will your party reduce the federal debt and allocate more financing towards the community?
Please start this one off for us, Ms. Flanagan.
Thank you for the question. Balanced budgets are important. However, there are occasions when it's important for governments to spend money. And investing in infrastructure is important to sustaining our quality of life and making us prepared to respond to climate change and other things that are going to be coming our way. It also causes lots of opportunities for work. The I'm sorry.
Next to respond, Mr. Sheehan.
Thank you very much. That's a great question. There's a few questions in there, but I'll answer a bunch. So let me begin, first of all, that the Liberals have a plan for middle-class tax relief, and that is so important right now. That's the majority of our population, and when our middle class is growing, the community is growing, and they're spending money in our community and growing business. That's important. The infrastructure question, and yes, we have to invest in the infrastructure and skills development. We announced again today $750 million towards skills development, and that is very, very important. We are stepping up where the Conservatives have pulled money out of the labor market agreement to the province so that they can spend money on training and retraining. The important about the infrastructure investment that I've talked about is so important. We need to invest in the port. We need to take a look at our highways. Is four-laning a possibility? Well, I sure would hope so, because it moves products quickly and makes people a lot safer and creates jobs. And our plan is to create those jobs. We need to kickstart this economy. They've talked about the balance book of last year that just came out. And that was on the backs of people like our veterans. They sent $1 billion back in unspent money. The First Nations, the seniors, and others, all sent back just to balance the books this year. Because before that, 6 consecutive years of deficits by the Conservatives. But no one's fooled. We're in a recession right now. We're in a recession. And the NDP had a similar plan to continue to try and balance the books in 6 months on the backs of our people. It doesn't make sense right now. It makes sense to kickstart the economy and get things going. And the Liberals have balanced books and had surpluses for years before the Conservatives came around, and we will do it once again. We're going to run short-term deficit, balance the books. That's what we do, and we have no problem doing that.
Thanks. Mr. Hayes.
Thank you. Yes, definitely balancing the budget is important, and you don't need to hear that just from me. The Canadian Federation of Independent Business is very supportive of the government's efforts to eliminate the deficit in 2015 and return to a balanced budget, and that's a quote. The Canadian Council of Chief Executives, and I quote, "In this challenging environment, it is vital that the federal government stay focused on balancing its budget." And we have, in fact, accomplished that. The Liberals have indicated that they intend on running a $10 billion deficit next year to meet their promises, a $10 billion deficit the year after, and who knows what in year number 3. The NDP have yet to cost out their promises. It's very important that you prioritize your taxes versus spending, and our Conservative government has a low tax plan for growth. That is what has fueled the economy. So there is a balance between taxes and spending, and we've actually proven through our policies that you can do both. You can spend, i.e., since forming government in 2006, we have increased transfers to provinces by 6% per year. So we are giving the provinces the money they need. At the same time, we're balancing the budget. Significantly important. In terms of reducing federal debt, well, obviously the first thing you need to do to reduce debt is you need to run a surplus. And in order to run a surplus, you need to be promoting your businesses, because businesses are the growth of the economy. They're the ones that give us our tax revenue, along with, of course, our personal tax revenue. So we need to return to surplus. Once you return to surplus, then you can use that to pay down the debt. And as a government, we have reduced the size of government significantly. We have controlled spending, and it's important. There's only one taxpayer. And we've managed to balance the budget, and we are currently running a $5 billion surplus. So we fully intend on balancing the budget at least again next year. Thank you.
Thank you. This question will be finished by Mr. Morrison.
Budgets don't balance themselves in spite of what the Liberal fantasy is that's currently circulating. New Democrats are serious about balancing the budget. We have a history of having the best statistical record of provincial governments and having balanced budgets. Mr. Hayes and Mr. Harper's government have reduced government by reducing federal public servants. Currently there is, according to the International Monetary Fund, approximately $700 billion of what they term dead money. This is the corporation's profits that are sitting, because since from 2000 the corporate tax rate was 28%, 2006 it was 22%, and it's successively dropped down to 15%. So what Mr. Hayes and Mr. Harper have done is effectively thrown away the chance to recoup a $12 billion a year tax from corporations. Now, these aren't corporations that are going to pick up and move. These are banks, utilities, telecoms, railways. It's not a matter of saying that you make these uncompetitive and they will leave and close up shop. They're going to stay here. Mr. Trudeau he's an amazing politician who, in the space of 1 year, went from, in April, saying that there would be a balanced budget. In August 7th, he said he was committed to a balanced budget. And on August 30th, he indicated that he had an epiphany and the balanced budget was not going to be there. There was going to be a massive deficit, and it was going to pay for itself by year 4. As a financial planner, I'm aware that that's not how you manage money, and we will not see a balanced budget
Thank you. Could the panel please bring forward the next question for the candidates?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak and ask the following question. As a result of the EI program's current design, Ontario employees end up subsidizing industries and workers in other provinces. Between 2000 and 2011, Ontarians contributed over $20 billion more to the EI program than they received. How will you commit to fixing the EI system?
Please open this one up for us, Mr. Sheehan.
Thank you very much. The EI program is a very important program. As I mentioned earlier, we have a number of people that are unemployed in this particular city at 12.4%. And what I've heard from them when I've been door knocking is that the system is not working for them. The cuts that Mr. Hayes had referred to has hit home here locally. The Service Canada EI site is not providing the service that is necessary. People are delayed. They're delayed too long. They can't get it. Families resort to, food banks when they're not able to access their EI claims. That's why we're committed to repealing Harper's 2012 changes to employment insurance, reducing the waiting period for employment insurance to 1 week from the 2 weeks, ensuring higher service standards for employment insurance processing so that benefits are delivered quickly and reliable, reducing employment insurance premiums from $1.88 to $1.65, ending the 9-10 hour eligibility penalty for workers entering or re-entering the workforce, introducing more flexible parental leave and compassionate care benefits that allow people to use their benefits in a way that works best for their families. Working with the provinces and territories will assess how successful employment insurance is delivering its core mandate to provide income security and how it can be improved. It's imperative that we look at the EI system as its whole, talk to all provinces, find out what's working. We know for a fact that with the current government, if you were unemployed, they asked you to leave your community to take a lower paying job elsewhere. And that was to serve another jurisdiction outside of Ontario because they couldn't get employees for low paying jobs. That's very unfortunate. People should have the opportunity to stay in their communities, stay with their families, not separate the families, offer them training programs, retraining programs. That's why we're also investing in the $750 million into the labor market. The Conservative government had removed it, leaving the provinces to scramble for money for retraining programs. Retraining programs are so important when we can take a crisis and turn it into an opportunity where someone has the opportunity to go back to a college, a university, take a trade, and retrain and come back and work. But of course, the jobs have to be there, and we have the job plan where the other two parties, the NDP and Conservatives, don't.
Thanks very much. Next for this question, Mr. Hayes.
Thank you very much. First, I want to just point out, and Mr. Sheehan keeps referring to the 12.4% unemployment rate in Sault Ste. Marie, and I think we've all read the paper, and I know there was an Algoma University professor that went on record and said that rate can't be verified. That was based on a survey of 205 homes in Sault Ste. Marie, and they said that there's no way to actually verify that the rate is in fact 12.4%. With respect to the EI system, again, I want to correct Mr. Sheehan. The EI system does not force you to leave your community in order to find another job. The EI system is actually modified depending upon the situation in your community. And we're aware that in the East Coast, some of the communities, the jobs just aren't so readily available. So the EI system is modified to compensate for those. We have said that we will increase the EI benefits to 32 weeks for compassionate care. I think that's important. We have frozen the EI rates for our small businesses, resulting in a 15% reduction in their taxes, and we have committed to lowering EI rates even further to the benefit of our employers, so that over the course of the next 2 years, they'll actually see another 20% reduction in their payroll taxes, and I think that's significantly important. So with respect to the Ontarians contributing over $20 billion more to the EI program than they received, I'm going to be very honest with the viewers. I was not aware of that. This is the first time I've heard that. And, you know, as your member of parliament for the past 4 some odd years, I can say with all honesty, I have not had one single constituent come into my office and tell me that the EI system is broken or isn't working for them. I'm certainly open to consultations, and the government is certainly open to consultations. And I'd like to actually speak with the individual that posed that question afterwards to better understand it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Morrison.
Some of the changes to the EI program are obvious and apparent. There's currently a requirement that you have to accept work at a 30% reduction of your previous job. We intend to improve access and eligibility for the EI program, reducing and or eliminating the waiting period. The SysTech program that was in place prior is a great example of how unions and employers can work together for retraining, for and apprenticeships enforced mandatory as part of federally funded projects. It all adds to the second part of what's wrong with the EI program is that there's not enough focus on getting people back to work. So if we can improve the job situation, and again, as a reminder that 80% of the jobs that are created in this country are small businesses. And the NDP saw that, and we were the first to request that as a law. Mr. Hayes and his government voted against it. And then imitation is the greatest form of flattery. Then after they saw that it was in our election platform, they decided to ask for the same thing, which, we're flattered by that. Although, as usual with the Harper government, they tweaked it a bit and said it would happen in 2019, just in time for the next election. So we think that the best way to solve the EI program, with all due respect, is to get people back to work, but to eliminate some of the restrictions that are imposed on people who are claiming.
Thank you. Please close this question for us, Ms. Flanagan.
Okay. The employment insurance program in Canada is just a great example of who we are. We are people who care about each other, and so we put safety nets in place so that we can take care of each other when things go wrong. I have to admit, I don't know a great deal about the employment insurance situation, so that I can't comment specifically on that. However, despite the growing number of two-income households, Canadian families are finding it harder and harder to make ends meet. Green Party programs and policies will reduce income inequality and ensure all Canadians have the opportunity to prosper. We will phase in a national guaranteed livable income to ensure that no person's income falls below what is necessary for health, life, and dignity. Through the Council of Canadian Governments, we will work with all other levels of government whose inadequate poverty Band-Aid solutions, such as welfare and disability programs, can be rolled up in order to fund the guaranteed livable income. Providing our most at-risk citizens with the resources they need to make ends meet greatly reduces the burden on our emergency and social services, our healthcare and criminal justice systems, saving Canadian society money and empowering all citizens to overcome periods of hardship. As an immediate first step, the Green Party would implement a federal minimum wage of $15 an hour. By providing a check to every Canadian over the age of 18, the carbon fee and dividend system will also assist in providing help to those who need it most. Thank you.
Thank you. Could we have the next question from the panel, please?
Thank you. Canada's international relations policy are important to international peace efforts that aim to stabilize the world. What is your plan to ensure that foreign aid, immigration and refugee policies support international peace efforts in an effective way? Given the current refugee crisis, do you think Canada should take in refugees, and how would you determine the limit on allowing more refugees into Canada? Thank you.
First in line for this question is Mr. Hayes.
Thank you very much. Very good question, sir. Thank you. I think it's important that people understand that Canada has probably one of the most generous per capita immigration and refugee resettlement programs in the world. As a matter of fact, 1 in 10 refugees worldwide are resettled here in Canada. And we have established a target to bring in 23,000 Iraqis due to the crisis, and thus far we've actually brought in 22,000, or resettled 22,000 Iraqis, and we've set a target to bring in an additional 11,300 Syrian refugees, of which thus far we have managed to resettle 2,300 Syrian refugees. And prior to that horrible image that we all saw, that was disconcerting for all of us, we had already agreed to an additional 10,000 refugees being brought into Canada. But we do want to make sure that we're bringing in the most vulnerable. And I think, it takes time to ensure that we're going through the proper screening to make sure that the right individuals are getting into Canada. And that screening is required. Last year alone in Canada resettled 262,000 immigrants here in Sault Ste. Marie, or not in Sault Ste. Marie, in Canada. And in Sault Ste. Marie, there was actually a fair number of Canadian citizens because I managed to be part of Canadian citizenship ceremonies. So we are having a watchful eye on the situation, most definitely. As a government, we've also said that we would match donations by the Canadian public in support of the refugees. So this is a very, very critical situation. We're very cognizant of it, and we're monitoring it closely. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Mr. Morrison.
Well, it's apparent that we must act, and we must do it now, and that's what Tom Mulcair and the NDP has adamantly stressed. We have suggested that the proper procedure is we have military transport and military personnel on site in Turkey and in that region, and we should send the immigration and Canadian federal workers directly there to facilitate and speed up the process. Again, that's going to be more difficult because of the massive cuts to the people employed in the immigration services by Mr. Harper. And I heard a ripple and a few gasps go through the crowd when Mr. Hayes expressed that we have one of the most welcoming refugee programs. I'm almost too baffled to even respond to that. I'll just leave that for later, and you can ask me for my comments outside. It's just absolutely not correct. And the second part of this is that the Harper government has cut foreign aid, and it has worsened the refugee situation with its military process and military policies. Canada is a peacekeeping humanitarian country, and we have always been proud of that. Ever since we were #1 in peacekeeping and humanitarian aid from Pearson till now. Under the Harper government, we are now 62nd, so I'm sure Mr. Hayes is quite proud of that too. Maybe 62 is his favorite number, I don't know.
Thank you. Ms. Flanagan.
Okay. Canada has strayed dangerously far from our peacekeeping roots. The Green Party sees international law and its institutions as the root of international justice and stability. We must never bypass the requirement for United Nations resolution before engaging militarily. Detainment without access to a fair trial and the use of torture in questioning suspects held in military or any other detention centers contravenes international human rights treaties and institutions. Respect for international law and international conventions is not only the baseline for moral activity, but is in fact the foundation of just and secure world. We must no longer turn a blind eye to incarceration practices that weaken international law and civil society, and therefore represent a deeper long-term security threat. threat. The Green Party will restore the capacity for superb diplomacy, a traditional Canadian strength. We will increase our overseas development assistance and revamp the Canadian International Development Agency to focus more on developing green economies and on poverty alleviation. We will expand our defense role in UN-led peacekeeping missions and in emergency and disaster relief and equip it accordingly. Our hearts go out for the people who are fleeing Syria. We cannot imagine having to leave everything behind. And they live the same lives that we do. They have jobs, they have homes, they go to school, and imagine walking away from that. As a humanitarian effort, we must all work together to help that these people find safety and security. And that's going to be a big job, but we can do it together.
Thank you. Mr. Sheehan.
Canada has traditionally been a leader in the world when it comes to foreign aid and immigration and refugee policies and supporting peacekeeping efforts. And I do agree with Mr. Morrison about Mr. Pearson. He was very effective at that. But recently we've seen a steady decline of that with cuts and with policies that have not supported these efforts. And it came to fruition with the Syrian refugee crisis. The Liberals had proposed to expand Canada's intake to 25,000 refugees from Syria through immediate direct sponsorship by the Government of Canada. And they also will work with private sponsors to intake even more. Invest at least $100 million this fiscal year to increase, without reducing standards, refugee processing, as well as sponsorship and settlement services capacities in Canada, and provide an immediate $100 million new contribution to the United Nations High Commission for Refugees to support the critical relief activities in Syria and the surrounding area. We've let that get down. I talked to a person here locally that used to do that kind of service for the federal government back in the day, and he started quoting off the various people from Vietnam that came, some other countries that had came and that he had placed. And he said, Terry, those services are no longer here in this community and across Canada. You know, we want to make sure that those services are available. We're a country of immigrants, save and except our First Nations people who've been here. My family's Irish. We escaped Ireland because of a potato famine, a natural disaster. We have constantly opened our doors, and we have to fix this problem because we're no longer held in high regard anymore internationally by the international community in the way we're doing foreign aid and dealing with our immigration.
Thanks very much. Please bring
Ontario has an infrastructure gap of approximately $60 billion, according to the Association of the Municipalities of Ontario. What is your plan to ensure that Sault Ste. Marie receives its fair share of infrastructure funding?
Starting with Mr. Morrison, please.
Municipalities need a stable, consistent, long-term infrastructure investment, and that's what the NDP plan will provide. The Federation of Canadian Municipalities assessed our plan and said, quote, the NDP's detailed plan will grow the economy, create local jobs, and improve the quality of life for Canadians and communities of all sizes. What we propose is a long-term, stable, consistent 20-year plan of $1.3 billion per year, which is the basis of what every municipality requires. They want to be able to make long-term plans. Too often we've seen, especially Liberals, who like to wear hard hats and do ribbon-cutting ceremonies and propose the big checks and present them. And it's a flash in the pan, and it results in deficits at some point that can't be made, and cuts are made from the federal government to the provinces, downloaded onto the municipalities who inherit the long-term infrastructure debt. We've seen it with Mr. Martin, famously balancing his budget by doing that. And exactly the same kind of thing is going to happen. So we will be targeting each municipality based on its expenditures and getting a share of that. But I think it's crucial to remember that If you can do long-term, stable, incremental funding for infrastructure projects, you can allow the municipalities to accurately forecast and plan what their specific needs are, rather than huge bridges going nowhere. But I'm sure that Terry and Justin will be really proud of those big bridges, but we will be paying for them, and we'll be seeing cuts to healthcare, to education, to long-term planning, and we've seen it before. The Liberals have done it, Conservatives have done it, and it's not going to work. It's consistent long-term planning, stable funding is what is required.
Thank you. Next in line, Ms. Flanagan.
Okay. The gap between the infrastructure funding our cities and towns need and the funding they receive is reaching crisis levels. Canada's infrastructure deficit is estimated to be upwards of $35 billion. We will work to close the gap by committing $6.4 billion per year, 1 point of the GST, to municipal infrastructure, providing stable long-term funding to Canadian municipalities, creating good jobs, and building vibrant, safe, and livable Canadian towns and cities. We will create a Canadian infrastructure bank to provide more robust and innovative financing and investment partnerships in order to build safer bridges, better roads, world-class water treatment facilities, affordable housing, efficient public transportation, and expanded broadband access, putting thousands of Canadians to work in the process. We will create additional sustainable jobs by introducing and expanding the home renovation tax credit to create incentives for individuals and companies to make their homes and businesses more efficient and accessible by installing high-efficiency insulation, solar heating and electricity, and energy-efficient appliances and accessibility upgrades. And we will unleash an army of carpenters, electricians, and contractors to take outdated and leaky public buildings, such as our schools, universities, and hospitals, and plug the leaks that increase greenhouse gases and costs. These changes alone will reduce carbon emissions by 30% nationwide. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sheehan.
As I mentioned before, we do have an infrastructure plan, unlike the NDP apparently. And ours is historic in nature. We're going to invest $60 billion more than is currently being spent, so about $125 billion in total. Of the $60 billion, we have a plan to finance it. We've shown it, and Mr. Hayes was right. We are going to run a $10 billion deficit over the next little while, but it's half of what the average deficit that your government has ran over the last 6 years. So I'm not getting either one of the parties' plans at all. Our plan does make sense. It is going to take care of that infrastructure gap. We will sign agreements with the provinces, like we did with the gas tax, or like we do with the gas tax, to make sure that the funding flows for not only buildings and bridges, but for senior facilities, for affordable housing that I think we need, I know we need, for transit and those services, and it does create jobs. And we have to get caught up. We have a huge deficit here locally. Our roads, they're $200 million deficient right now in Sault Ste. Marie. Our West End treatment plant needs to be fixed within the next 10 years. That's $48 million. And the list goes on and on and on. We have about $544 million in needs over the next little while, and we have to do something about it. The Conservative government did invest in some infrastructure, the canal, the armories, and the federal lab. But those are all federal buildings. They should have been invested in 10 years ago, not a week before the election.
Thanks. Please wrap this one up for us, Mr. Hayes.
Thank you very much. Our government certainly understands the positive impact that quality infrastructure has on economic growth, job creation, and long-term prosperity. That's why our government has increased investments dramatically since 2006, and federal investments in infrastructure are at an all-time high. And the results are clear. According to Stats Canada, the average age of Ontario's infrastructure has declined by 1.9 years since 2006, when we formed government. Our progress in providing communities with new infrastructure is highly positive and will continue to succeed through the New Building Canada plan. And part of that plan is the federal gas tax fund. And our Sault Ste. Marie, for example, will receive $4.5 million next year through the federal gas tax fund. And this is a fund that our government has legislated as permanent. We've indexed it at 2% per year. We've actually doubled its original amount. We also have implemented through the Build Canada plan the Small Communities Fund, and that's something I mentioned earlier with respect to the Fort Creek Aqueduct, which will receive $10.4 million from the Small Communities Fund to assist them. Now, interestingly enough, we have seen infrastructure investments grow from $3.4 billion under the previous federal Liberal government in 2006 to $12.3 billion in Ontario. And we've done this while balancing the budget and keeping taxes at their lowest rate in 50 years. The other parties would love to raise taxes and run deficits to fund their promises. We will not do that. Our $53 million plan, the largest infrastructure plan in Canadian history, is a 10-year plan that will provide for our communities.
Thank you very much. The next part of the forum this evening will showcase your personalities to the constituents. When I pose the question, please share with us the first one or two words that come to mind. Starting with Ms. Flanagan. Where is your favorite travel destination?
I have the land.
The land? Mm-hmm. Mr. Sheehan?
Provincial Park up north.
Mr. Hayes?
Out west of BC to visit my parents.
Mr. Morrison?
It used to be a cabin up by just north of Trout Lake on the ACR line, but I can't get there anymore.
The next question is starting with Mr. Sheehan. What is the best book that you've ever read?
I think the best book was my favorite of all time. I got so many of them. Wow. To Kill a Mockingbird.
Mr. Hayes?
Dances with Wolves.
Mr. Morrison?
I read all 7 Harry Potter books out loud to my daughter twice, so I can't pick one of the 7, but we'll go with the first one, The Philosopher's Stone.
Thank you. Ms. Flanagan?
I love a book that changes the way I look at the world, and the last book that did that for me was The Inconvenient Indian.
The next question is going to be started by Mr. Hayes. What is one talent that you wished you had, but you don't?
I wish I could sing.
Mr. Morrison?
Sorry, what did Mr. Hayes say? I didn't hear.
He wished he could sing.
Well, I wish he could tap dance too, so we could really be entertained with the Harper conservative stories.
Ms. Flanagan?
I've always wanted to learn how to whistle. It just never happened for me.
Mr. Sheehan?
I think the power to heal. My wife works in the medical profession, and I'm always amazed by what they do.
Thank you. Can you share with us again, please?
The power to heal. My wife works in the medical profession, and I think that is an awesome talent to have.
Thank you. The next question is to be started by Mr. Morrison. What is the best piece of advice that you have ever received?
My father always told me, make sure that you can look everyone in the eye, no matter when you see them. So treat everyone with honor and deal straight with them. That's held me in good stead.
Thank you. Ms. Flanagan?
Always do your best.
Thanks very much. Mr. Sheehan?
Always tell the truth. That way you don't have to remember the lies you told.
And Mr. Hayes?
Manage your expectations.
Thanks very much for your participation. For the last part of the forum, each candidate will have 2 minutes for closing remarks, starting opposite of the open remarks. Starting with Mr. Hayes.
Thank you. When I sought your support in 2011 to become your Member of Parliament, the Conservative government and I had a plan that I campaigned on, and I'm proud to say that we have kept our word. We said we would lower taxes, enhance benefits for seniors and families, get rid of the wasteful and ineffective long gun registry, open markets for our businesses, and balance the budget. We did all of those and much more. Both the Liberals and NDP would undo many of the Conservative policies that have enabled Canada to emerge from the global recession better than most. I am confident you will not allow them that opportunity. From a personal perspective, I told you that I would work hard, I would never let my integrity be challenged by politics, and that I would do my best to make sure Sault Ste. Marie's concerns were heard in Ottawa. I am confident I have delivered. What I told myself was that if I looked back and could say that I made a real positive difference in people's lives, then I would seek re-election. And that's why I'm here today. I'm very proud to say my efforts will have a profound positive impact on the lives of our injured veterans and on the lives of women and children who suffer from the harsh consequences of domestic violence. I'm so proud to be a member of the Standing Committee on Veterans Affairs as I work for positive change in honor of all veterans, but most importantly, in honor of my father, who spent 37 years in the Royal Canadian Air Force. Regrettably, he passed away just prior to me becoming your Member of Parliament. My private member's motion on domestic violence prevention was unanimously supported, went to committee for study, and a report titled Promising Practices to Prevent Violence Against Women and Girls was tabled in the House in June. I look forward to returning to Ottawa as your Member of Parliament to continue my work on domestic violence prevention. On October 19th, I'm asking you for your continued confidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Sheehan, your closing remarks?
Thank you very much. Thanks to all in attendance today and all who organized this event. It was great. It is so important for people to hear and to see their candidates. To the candidates, thank you for being here this evening as well. Over the next little while, I'm going to be unveiling more and more specifics and more of my platform locally about what I plan to do for your community. In the past, you've known me. You've seen my hard work. I have been innovative. I've been creative. I'm energetic. I stay fresh. And I continue to work hard. I work hard in my regular job, and I work hard as a city councillor as well. I have what I believe the talent and the necessary ability to bring people together to move this community forward. That has been my forte. I will bring that to you as your MP. I will be accessible. I will always be visible in the community, and I will be your strong voice in Ottawa. Right now, we have Ottawa's voice here in Sault Ste. Marie. I promise to be that. A lot has been said here tonight. I can only tell you that the Liberals have a real plan for change. It's a plan that we need. It is totally different from the Conservative NDP plan, which is very interested in balancing the books in the next 6 months when we're the only G7 country in a recession. The NDP have about $28 billion of promises that they're in the hole with. They've reneged on healthcare promises and also on promises dealing with transit and childcare. It's impossible for them to keep all those billions of promises and keep the books balanced. The Conservatives are offering you more of the same. If you are interested in a real change, a change that will help kickstart this economy, we got to get this number down. Some people don't believe that 12.4% is right. Well, I've been at the door, and I'm at the door, and I'm running into a lot of people who are unemployed from Tenaris, from ACR, from the spin effect from there. I tell you, that number is real, and we got to deal with it and take it head on.
Thank you very much. Ms. Flanagan, please share your final thoughts.
Thank you for organizing this and including us. And thank you for all the people who are getting involved and paying attention and trying to learn about our election in 2015, how important this is. I have to apologize to you and to the Green Party because tonight I did not do a very good job in sharing how wonderful their platform is. It brought hope back into my life as an environmentalist who sees things going, degrading rapidly. And it's very frustrating to not know how to fix that. So I apologize that I wasn't able to share that with you, and I did a disservice to the Green Party, and I apologize for that. However, it's important that everyone get out to vote. And I need to stress that because 40% of our people did not vote in the last election. The Green Party, I could actually win if those 40% showed up and voted for me, so that would be fabulous. A lot of people are disgusted with the process, and the Green Party is as well. We don't attack people. We want to work with all the parties. We know there's solutions, and we need to make them happen. If people are frustrated or don't know who to vote for, there are resources on the CBC website. There's a questionnaire called Vote Compass, and you answer the questions, and it will help identify the party that best represents what you believe. It's important to encourage our young people to make sure on the Elections Canada website that they are registered to vote and that they have the proper identification. The rules have been changed. The game is rigged, so we need to find a way around that. Not voting is not a protest, it's surrender. And if you don't vote for what you believe, you'll never have the government you want. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Morrison, your final comments, please.
I have to reiterate, this is the most important election in this country's history. We've seen a government that we all acknowledge is so bizarre in its extremes. The legislation that they have put forward, the manner in which they have put them forward in omnibus bills, closed debate, closing discussion, shutting down the true effects of Parliament. This government, this Harper government, deserves all of the insults and disgust that you can attach to it. They have attacked the entire democratic process. They've attacked democratic rights and freedoms through Bill C-51. They have ignored the needs of First Nations, of seniors, of youth, and how anyone can sit at the other end of this table and say he's proud of what they've done for veterans, with the number of offices closed, with the number of dollars unspent from budgets, forcing veterans year after year to prove that they don't have legs anymore, suing them in court. It disgusts me that you would say that. This is a time for change. I think the NDP government has proven that we have a well-thought-out, methodical process. Yes, we will have a costed budget when it is due in the next week. We will show that we are going to advance with the promises. We have not suggested raising taxes other than on corporations who are sitting on huge numbers of accounts and dollars that have not been taxed. We have room to do that. Mr. Hayes, rather than addressing the crucial issues of jobs and the economy, has decided rather to attack the NDP by suggesting falsely that we are going to reintroduce the long gun registration. We have no intention, absolutely categorically, it is not going to be brought up. We have no intention.
Thank you very much. On behalf of the Sault Ste. Marie Chamber of Commerce and our partner agencies, I would like to thank our candidates for taking part in this forum. We wish each of you the best in the remaining campaign period. I would like to once again thank our partner agencies this evening, Shaw Television and its staff and volunteers who are here to televise tonight's panel, Local 2 and Village Media for their assistance in streaming tonight's event online, Algoma University and its Political Science Department for their input into tonight's event and their assistance with the development of the questions, and Sault College for the assistance with marketing tonight's event, and the students from the Public Relations and Event Management program on hand to deliver the questions. We would also like to acknowledge the staff of the City of Sault Ste. Marie, and in particular the City Clerk's Office, who are instrumental in securing use of Council Chamber for this evening. Lastly, we would like to thank everyone here in Council Chambers or viewing at home for joining us. We hope that this panel has helped better inform you about each of the candidates and their respective platforms. We remind and encourage all of you to get out and vote on Monday, October 19th. Thank you again, and have a great evening.
The proceeding was an independently produced community access program. The viewpoints expressed are those of the community access producer and do not reflect those of Shaw Cable.